situation she is. She's able to help Rick reunite Morty's healthy and toxic personalities, and is one of the few people at school shown to be nice to Morty, greeting him when he addresses her. She's well aware of Rick and had her own interactions with him, being called by a crying Rick who missed his Morty until they were able to get the teenager retoxified. Considering all this, Jessica has shown to be capable and not as clueless as we first assumed she is, gravitating towards Morty due to her interest in science and becoming genuinely curious about Morty's adventures with Rick. Next up is one of the Vindicators, Alan Reyes. One of the more arrogant members of the Vindicators, he jumps at any chance to brag about his own powers of being able to summon ghost trains. We aren't really sure how useful the power would be since we don't really see it in action. Instead, Alan just gripes and tries to use brute force when any conflict comes up, such as when he grabbed Rick by the throat when the deadly game started. Alan also isn't great at figuring out when to confront a problem, and used the tension that was already brewing to force Million Ants and Supernova to admit their affair. Bad timing. Next, we have the young woman from the Purge planet, Arbrisha, one of the many people caught in the crossfire of the annual massacre. She used Rick and Morty's ship to escape the carnage before tricking Rick and shooting. Arbrisha was a young girl in a desperate situation, so we understand why she took the measure that she did. Though using the excuse of a relative needing saving was a poor one that she clearly stumbled through, we give Arthricia points for being able to formulate some sort of plan to scare her leaders and try to get them to stop the killings. When she was caught by Rick, she smartly revealed what her intentions were so the scientists could offer some real help. She had no way of knowing her society would collapse without the Purge in place, so we still say it was a good effort on her part. Now we're really getting into the college-bound characters. These are the characters who are just a stone throw away from the top. All of them are truly intelligent. First, we have a short-lived addition to the Smith family, Morty Jr. A young alien that only knew the Smith home up until he was a teenager. He was easy to trick into staying in the house, but that doesn't make him dumb by any means. After all, he had no reason to not believe his father when Morty told him he would die if he went outside. When Morty Jr. went on his rampage, he was stopped with a simple song about hands, showing he still had the mentality of a child, having only been alive for a few hours. And we see by the end that Morty Jr. was able to find success and overcome his sheltered youth. Moving on to the terror, Scary Terry. He was a creature who was taught his only purpose in life was to be frightening, and if he couldn't accomplish scaring people, he was a failure. His whole education revolved around how to use people's deepest fears against them, meaning the education involved a lot of psychology. So when it comes to the human mind, Scary Terry is incredibly informed, which we see in his interactions with his wife, when he lashes out, and when Rick and Morty help him in his own dreams. Next up, we have Mr. Meeseeks. Despite being alive for only a short time, the Meeseeks are able to handle almost any problem. They're shown to have an understanding for sports, relationships, and general human behavior. And when pushed too far, they're shown to be relentless in finding a solution to ending their existence. Sure, the Meeseeks are said to specialize in simple problems, but they've shown to be useful far more. It was a tricky choice, but we opted to place the talking cat next. We give the talking cat some points for being able to cover up his violent past. He knew to involve himself with people like Jerry or kids more interested in partying, so they didn't learn the truth about what he was. But at the same time, he never really makes it clear if he wants to be asked questions or not. He states that any answer he gives wouldn't be satisfying, and so to just roll with it, while at the same time he pouts over not being interrogated on what he is, or where he comes from. Honestly, pick a lane. Moving on to the horrible King Jellybean. He's not the only corrupt king in the show, but he is one of the most traumatizing. He was one of those guys who was able to use his status and influence over the people to pull the wool over their eyes and hide his true nature. King Jellybean was a scumbag, but he knew how to play people to keep them in the dark, and we admit that took some form of resourcefulness and manipulation. Next up is the President. A man who rose to power on the idea of representing the people. He quickly became fixated on the idea of having Rick and Morty work for him at the drop of a hat. He took a personal offense to the two blowing him off and began reacting to them like a child throwing a fit on a playground. While it was amusing to see a grown man throw a fit over not being respected the way he wanted, we also see his reasoning. The president had to represent the country and be seen as a figure of authority, and so any outright disrespect towards him was considered to be treason. At least it was when Rick went about it, basically breaking into the Capitol and getting several security guards to get killed in the crossfire. But the president also knew when he couldn't be beaten, and smartly admitted defeat to Rick. Next we have the canine Snuffles. Going from the dog who peed on the rug in front of his owners to leader of the new world, Snuffles proved to have quite the transformation. We can't place him higher on the list, since it was Rick's technology that gave Snuffles the footing to be seen as intelligent. But we can't fully disregard all that Snuffles was able to accomplish once he was able to communicate with humans and form an army. We know some people might complain, but we have to place Beth next on the list. Yes, she's a surgeon, and that takes a lot of skill, but Beth is also one of the most easily influenced characters in the show. It obviously doesn't make her dumb, but it does occasionally make her do dumb things. She takes Jerry back despite knowing that things between them aren't stable. She trusts her father with her kids even though she knows what he does, and she completely ignores the experience with the mythologs and how toxic they portrayed her relationship to be. But when we see the other version of her, Space Beth, we also see that Beth has the ability to challenge the Galactic Federation and make a name for herself. Next up, we have the nerve gas, Bart. Considering himself to be a higher form of existence, he is able to use his powers to warp people's emotions, so they do as he wants. But this power leads to Bart being cocky. He's able to get Morty to free him and gain Morty's sympathy. But then, just as he's about to head home, he revealed his entire plan to Morty. Honestly, why would you tell someone that you're going to come back with an army and kill them and everyone like them? And how calm Bart is when he says it, just know that he didn't even consider Morty doing anything about the information. Moving on, we get to the first half of the infamous duo, Morty Smith. We know Morty isn't the best student, but he's displayed that he's not as much of an idiot as everyone thinks he is. Morty is one of the few people in the family who can call people out for acting up, usually with the other person being Summer or Beth. He knows how to get Rick to cave and do things for him for a change, such as making their reset technology and getting Rick to take Jerry on an adventure despite Rick hating Jerry. Morty was able to rally the other Mortys together to fight what they thought was the evil Rick, and had been the one to solve all the games Rick set up for the Vindicators. Not to mention being able to beat Rick at checkers in that white memory. But in the end, Morty is also just a curious kid who makes a lot of mistakes, and has to learn from them. Usually, Morty is just chalked up as an anxious kid, but his anxiety comes from a reasonable place. Following her brother is Summer. Much like her brother, Summer is able to call out other people and look at things objectively. But she also gets swept up a lot in her emotions, and that typically leads to her going with the flow or acting out. She makes stupid choices like her brother does, including trying to give herself bigger breasts and making herself a giant by accident. But she's also a lot like Rick in the sense that she usually knows when she's being used as a scapegoat or a crutch, as seen when she tells Jerry he's bored and trying to start drama, or when she makes her dad admit to being a closeted racist. She's also trusted by Rick to carry out certain safety measures, such as in the Morty's Mind Blowers episode when she was able to get Rick and Morty's memories back for them. Next is the marriage counselor, Glaxito Simslam, along with Dr. Wong. Both are well educated when it comes to relationships. Both are able to talk a person through how toxic their lifestyle is in a non-threatening manner. But neither of them know how to get through to people like Beth and Rick who are, to a degree, content in the direction their life is heading. Moving on to the devil himself, Lucius Evil. Running a shop full of items that are found out to be cursed is not the most creative thing he could be doing, considering we've seen countless setups like this before. And it isn't really clear how he's able to translate this occupation to a website later on in the episode. He also hints Doc in some points for trying to use Summer without any foresight to how she would react or how she would use her grandfather to get revenge. But we also have to admit that Lucius managed to be a success when it came to how he wanted to be seen by the general public. Next up, we have Ship. Yeah, she's a machine, so her intelligence is the result of programming, but we still feel it's only right to give her a higher spot after all she accomplished. Like Snuffles, she gained her intellect from Rick, but was able to find a way to use it in a unique way. She followed all of Summer's requests, but Ship showed she could really mess with a person, either physically or psychologically. And in a single night, she was able to end a war between humans and spiders. That had been going on for generations. Moving on to Bird Person. later to be known as Phoenix Person. When interacting with Morty and Beth, he reveals quite a bit about Rick and their past, exposing himself as a wanted criminal. He even makes a note that he was becoming too intoxicated and was sharing more information than he needed when speaking to Beth at the wedding. He knocked him down a few spots because of one key thing: his awareness of members of the Galactic Federation at his wedding. One could argue that he didn't call attention to it because he wanted to be able to get married and not ruin the day for Tammy. But if that was the case, then it really didn't work out in his favor. Rounding out this category, we have another friend of Rick's, Squanchy. Sure, we don't see a lot of him, but we felt he earned a higher placement than a fair amount of other characters based on one action in particular: getting Rick and his family to escape the ambushed wedding. He was able to not only get Rick to snap out of it, but uses his ability to change his size to fight off Federation agents, and give Rick and his family the chance to flee. Finally, we have the Geniuses. These characters are capable of running large-scale operations. They're dangerous and powerful because they know how to outsmart everyone. First up in this category, we have Tammy, an agent of the Galactic Federation. She was able to pull off growing close to Rick's family by using Summer. After meeting Bird Person at a house party that Rick hosted, she quickly moved in and established a relationship with the wanted man. Tammy was even able to get Bird Person revived and use his love for her to hunt Rick down alongside the Federation. Taking the next spot is Mr. Poopy Butthole. When we see him during the heist episode, we see that Mr. Poopy Butthole is a respected professor and well-trained fighter, which is quite the change from him once being suspected as a parasite. Unfortunately, he lost his job after he wound up landing the students that attacked him in the hospital. We also wanted to point out his willingness to forgive Beth for shooting him, knowing why she had done it and what the stakes had been. Next up is Doofus Rick. Though he's been labeled the dumbest Rick, he's still a Rick. There is no doubt that he's got some questionable habits based on what Rick informed Jerry of, but we can't help but also appreciate the good we see in this character. He's able to use his talent for science to create things that make people happy, including making experiments. Jerry shows off his collection of coins. Doofus Rick assures him that so long as the coins brought Jerry some joy, that made them valuable, and he shouldn't be embarrassed by it. Next is Cop Morty. A dirty cop, he's able to use the drift between Morty's and Rick's on the Citadels to get away with a lot, including killing his last partner in order to keep benefiting from Big Morty. His final display of trying to get his new partner to show pity on him shows just how good of an actor he can be, and how he knew just what to say to get a Rick to let him go. Following his temporary partner is Cop. Since he can ride his top over Cop Morty, Rick becomes hotter than his temporary partner. Cop Rick may play by the book, but he also was a quick learner. After being shanked by one Morty who thought he was helping, this Rick wasn't going to make the same mistake again, even if it was the Morty he was supposed to be working with. Moving on to another Vindicator, Supernova. The surviving member of the Vindicators, she was also incredibly full of herself. We have to place her high on our list because, in the end, she was able to survive the games Rick set up and got away with killing her teammates. She knew her status as a beloved hero would make up for any blood that may end up on her hands, with Supernova able to play it off as getting rid of a threat. We can't forget about the pleasant assassin from Lawless Mike. This guy had to have been given his job to be able to get the consistent work and fancy weapons he had. Not to mention a business card that would make Patrick Bateman from American Psycho fly into a jealous rage. Without a doubt, if Morty hadn't interfered, Krumbopolis would have continued a long career in killing. Our next spot goes to the hive mind, Unity. She puts a lot of thought into how to use her powers to maintain peace in the galaxy. While there are some moral dilemmas that Summer brought up, we can't argue with the results Unity achieved. And though she clearly loved Rick and got a lot of joy out of spoiling him with her powers, she also knew that they weren't right for one another because of who she became when she was around him. And it takes a lot of insight and self-discipline to reach that kind of choice. Next is the story lore. Much like Reggie, he was going to take advantage of beating Rick to a pulp while he had the chance to do so. But unlike the once godlike figure, the story lord had more motivation. He wanted to be able to use Rick and Morty in order to break through the fifth wall. That couldn't be an easy thing to pull off. Not to mention the fact that story lord maintained a trend of endless anthologies, which is impressive to say the least. Our next ranking goes to the Galactic Federation and the Citadel of Ricks. Both are powers that control the people, but they do have slightly different methods of doing so. The Federation like to drug their citizens and give them pointless rewards to keep them from rebelling. The Citadel used fear and degradation. Both methods have worked well enough for societies in the past, but both of these powers have one thing in common. They were taken down by Rick in a single afternoon due to their cockiness. Our fourth most brilliant character has to be Zeep Zanflor. An unintentional copy of Rick, he resides in the multiverse battery and wound up copying Rick's idea of how to generate power. Right away, we see the obvious similarities with these two. Both have a disregard for the public school system offered to them, believing it to be for the less gifted. In the end, Zeep was left having to cave to what Rick wanted, but we have no doubt that he'll return with a vengeance. It was a close call, but we have to give the Bronze Medal of Brilliance to Evil Morty, better known now as President Morty. While Cop Morty was a great actor, this Morty earned an Oscar for his performance. He was able to use his former Rick as a puppet and a cover, killing countless Ricks and using their Mortys as a way of hiding his location. Once it was safe, he rose to power again, stating he wanted to unite the Ricks and Mortys of the Citadel. When the Shadow Council tried intimidating him, Evil Morty came back just as hard, having many of them executed on the spot. The Silver Medal of Brilliance we're giving to the Testicle Monsters, or Time Cops. These creatures have mastered time and space in a way that even Rick hasn't, as seen when they had to intervene with the split timeline. These creatures are shown to be capable of jumping around time and space with little to no trouble, only intervening when they feel it necessary. But we do have to place them second for mistaking Einstein as Rick and beating him up. That was a pretty funny mix-up. And I'm sure it's no surprise, but we're giving the Gold Medal of Brilliance to Rick Sanchez. Love him or hate him, Rick always finds a way to come out ahead. Declared the smartest man in the universe, Rick always finds a way to come out on top.